Hello and welcome to another edition of A Walk Through Philippians. Today we are looking at Philippians chapter 1 verses 12 to 19. And we've seen an incredible introduction where Paul introduces himself and he has a very personal introduction to the Philippians and shares a wonderful and very deep prayer for them. And then he starts sharing a little bit about his own current situation that he's facing. And we see as we read this that he was writing this letter from prison. He was in chains, as he says. He was imprisoned as he was reading this, as he was writing this, and as they were probably reading it. And it gives us some incredible insight to the way he thinks. And today we're going to specifically look at how he viewed his current situation that he was in. Let's have a look together. We're going to read this passage from verse 12 through to verse 19. Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually advanced the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else that my imprisonment is because I am in Christ. Most of the brothers have gained confidence in the Lord from my imprisonment and dare even more to speak the word fearlessly. To be sure, some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. These preach out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. The others proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, thinking that they will cause me trouble in my imprisonment. What does it matter? Only that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is proclaimed, and in this I rejoice. Yes, and I will continue to rejoice because I know this will lead to my salvation through your prayers and help from the Spirit of Jesus Christ. So we see an incredible statement here where Paul doesn't moan or complain or cry out in anguish. Why is he suffering in this way? Why does he find himself in chains? Why is he imprisoned? Instead, he looks at it and he describes the situation through a different kind of lens. And through this lens, he sees God moving and working and doing an incredible work. And so today, I want to specifically look at, there are, I believe, at least 6 evidences that Paul sees of God's gracious hand at work. And then in the next session, we're going to look at the overriding theme of seeing God's gracious hand of providence at work, even in amongst our suffering and our troubling and situations and our trials that we face. So let's look at these 6 places that I believe are Paul seeing evidence of God's goodness at work, even in his situation. Firstly, we see in verse 13, it says that what has happened to me in his imprisonment has actually advanced the gospel so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else that knows of the story, everyone else who hears about this, that my imprisonment is because I am in Christ. This is an incredible statement that he says. He says, actually, look what this has served. Look how this a trying and difficult situation has actually served to advance the gospel. What has happened here is that my imprisonment has been seen by this large guard, this whole group of soldiers have seen that I'm in prison, and they recognize that this is because I am, as he says, in Christ. What a powerful testimony this is. This is not only even the soldiers looking, but everyone else in the surrounding circles who hears about this, who comes across his path, who knows of the story, knows that he is there because he is in Christ. And what a powerful testimony that is, to say that actually I value Christ above my freedom. And for that message to go out to people is a very powerful one indeed. So Paul sees evidence of God at work in his imprisonment through people knowing that he is there because he is in Christ. Secondly, if we look at verse 14, I think there's two evidences here that has encouraged Paul as he sees God working in amidst his difficult situation. Firstly, most of the brothers have gained confidence in the Lord from my imprisonment. Most of the brothers, so most of the saints who hear of his story, those who have journeyed with him, those who know about him, most of them have actually gained confidence even in his situation. And I think there's an incredible encouragement for us in that if you or I are facing trials and difficulties, there is an opportunity for us to demonstrate that we are in Christ even in those moments, and that to be a witness. And at the same time, as we continue to trust God in those moments, there are people who will see that and gain confidence. They'll be spurred on and they'll say, wow, this person is facing such a trial, such a challenge. Even in the imprisonment, they trust Christ. And those people are then encouraged and spurred on in their walk with God. They are given courage. They gain confidence in the Lord. And Paul saw evidence of that happening even through his imprisonment. Then they gained confidence in the Lord, in their trust and hope in the Lord. But even more so, that bubbled up and burst out and flowed out. And they dared even more to speak the word fearlessly. Isn't this remarkable? Paul was imprisoned because he was being faithful to Christ and speaking the word. And his imprisonment worked to stir people up to do the very thing that he was imprisoned for. This is such a remarkable thing, and we can just see God at work in every way in this. Surely what Satan intended to bring fear, to break down the spread of the gospel, God used to actually stir it up and to cause his gospel to be advanced more fearlessly and I think more effectively. Then as we carry on reading, we see in verse 15, it says, to be sure, some people preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. Now, difficulties and hardships and challenges and trials have an incredible way of filtering out, of bringing out impurities. They are like heating something up, heating a metal up that gets hot, and the impurities float up and come out to the top. And just as hardships and difficulties stir out and push out impurities, we see this kind of filtering happening in Paul's situation, where there were many believers who were moving and working and many preaching and working for God, but this pressure, this difficulty, this trial seemed to cause these motives to bubble up and to come out and to demonstrate that in fact many are not truly there with hearts after God, but they are pursuing God and following after God with other motives, with motives of envy, against Paul's popularity, perhaps against his fame, against his effectiveness, envy and rivalry. And we see these kind of motives being pushed up and out through Paul's hardship and through his imprisonment as he faced that. And then at the same time, the other deeper motives of actually my heart is really to preach the gospel because I love God and there is this goodwill inside of them that was brought up to the surface and revealed as well. And these difficulties and trials seem to have an incredible way of filtering up and pushing out these things to the surface, so we can really see what's lying underneath the surface. And I think for ourselves, we can see in our own trials and difficulties, our own motives being pushed out to the surface. And sometimes we'll be pleasantly surprised what comes out, and other times we'll be disappointed. But it's not to be discouraged in those moments, but to see and to learn from them. And Paul saw this filtering happening, even in amongst his imprisonment that he was facing. Fifthly, Paul saw that actually his imprisonment was an opportunity for God to work a miracle. He says that I will continue to rejoice because I know this will lead to my salvation through your prayers and help from the Spirit of Jesus Christ. Through your prayers and help from the Spirit of Jesus Christ. There is a hopefulness that Paul has even in his imprisonment, that this imprisonment will be a platform, it will be an opportunity for God to demonstrate his power, for prayers to be stirred up and answered, that God may get all the glory. Isn't that an incredible thing? Your hardships, my hardships, Paul's hardships in his imprisonment was a platform. It was like a stage being built and set up. And sometimes it's the harder the hardship, the higher the stage, the bigger the speakers going up, the louder the amplification that comes, and the stage is set for God to work a great miracle for his glory. And Paul was hopeful of that. He saw this as an opportunity. And then sixth and lastly, and I think there may be more things that Paul saw in his own in his imprisonment and evidences of God's goodness and grace at work in that. But this is the last one I want to highlight for today, and that was that even in amongst this hardship, there was a joy that was stirred up within Paul's heart. Inside his heart, there was a joy bubbling up and coming out. And again, it's such a remarkable thing. What Satan intends to bring discouragement and perhaps even despair for Paul, to in a sense try and hold him back from what he's doing, to try and train him down, to try and discourage and stop, to try and bring all sorts of obstacles to the advancement of the gospel. Paul laughs at that and he says, what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. And we're introduced to an incredible theme here, and that is of joy that comes through again and again through the book of Philippians. And he says that I will continue to rejoice. And he says that in this, I rejoice. Yes, I will continue to rejoice. There is a joy that is stirred up in Paul as he sees the evidence of God at work in his most difficult and trying situation, and through the situation and into the hearts and lives of others. And it stirs a joy within him. There is this unstoppable joy of God that is stirred up inside of us, even in amongst hardship and difficulty, so that he may receive all the glory. God bless you. I hope you are encouraged that as you face your own imprisonments or your own challenges and trials, you would see that these are actually opportunities and situations where God is moving and is at work and is sometimes the most fertile ground for his glory and for your good and for your greatest joy. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.